You're on.
Hi, alright. So this is the finished kimono, okay? I've got the belt tied at the front and it's just on the model and it's looking really nice. Basically this takes about 5 hours in my classes to make, so 2 sessions to cut out and complete. You could always do things like add pockets to it as well yourself. Obviously this is a long one, but some people make them like short or knee length, so that's just up to you, and it's obviously marked on the pockets on the pattern, the different lengths. So there you go. I hope most of all that you really enjoy doing this and it's a nice relaxing project for you. So don't go too fast and pin everything really well before you sew it, and use your iron a lot and keep ironing in between every stage and make sure everything's nice and flat and have fun. Okay, so before we start, just make sure you've got all your equipment together. So you need some pins, you need a nice pair of scissors that are quite sharp, and you need a fabric marker to mark your seams. Sometimes it really helps, you know, if you're finding it hard to sew in a straight line. So I've got here, this is just like a blue fabric marker and it washes off with water. So you can use that if you're on sort of pretty light fabrics, but if you're on a dark fabric that might not show up, so you can use this tailor's chalk. You use the edge of it and it does quite a nice straight line, so they might be really handy. Also a ruler, have some sort of a straight edge, whatever you can put your hand, you know, get your hands on. And oh yeah, you need to take measure, and these are really helpful snippers. They save you searching around for your scissors all the time when you're sewing and you're, you know, trying to tidy up your loose edges. So sometimes they're really handy if you put them on a little bit of elastic around your neck or something. Just be careful you don't stab yourself with them. And here's my fabric. So this is what I've chosen for the kimono. And although I often say for beginners that cotton's really nice to work with, I do find a viscose really hangs nicely for big garments. It's really flowy. So this is viscose. I've got 3.5 meters of it. Actually, I've got 3. If it's wide, if it's a 140 wide, you could probably get away with 3 meters. But if it's any narrower than that, you'll need to have the 3.5 meters. Okay, so right, I'm going to lay this out now, and then I'll be back in a sec. Okay, so when you're laying your fabric out ready to cut, what we do, we put the right sides together always. When you're sewing and when you're cutting, always put your right sides together. And you can see here, this is called a selvage. You can always tell because it's a little bit frayed and it's got dots on it. So you put those 2 selvages together. So basically you're folding your fabric over, so it's going to be narrower than the width of it. Okay. So you might notice that sometimes you can't really tell what's the right side and the wrong side of your fabric. And a way of finding out is if you put your finger along these little dots, they're raised on the right side. Okay, so if you're wondering what the right side of your fabric is, that's a good way of finding out. These are a little bit more raised on this side. Okay, so put them together and you can use the iron. Just make sure it's nice and flat. Okay. I find if you use viscose for your project rather than cotton or linen, you're going to find this a little bit more trickier because viscose moves a little bit more because it's quite drapey. But you do end up with a nice kimono out of it. It'll look very nice. So I'm going to start with the front of the pattern that looks like this. It's got the curved edge on it. Okay, and we can see here we've got what's called a grain line, okay, and we've got an arrow head at the top of the grain line. So when we're putting our pattern pieces on our fabric, there's 2 things to remember. These arrows always point the same direction, so then we can make sure that the fabric pieces are always going the same direction. You don't cut something upside down by mistake. And also that these grain lines run parallel to the selve edge of the fabric, and that's because if it was, you know, you've got to line the fabric up with the weft of the fabric, otherwise you could find it just doesn't hang as nice, so that's quite important. So how we do this, oh, where's my you take measure file off. So basically it's dead easy. You just get your line this up with your grain, and we'll see that it's 20 centimeters to the selve edge. Okay, so what I'm going to do there is shove a little pin in it, just loosely, just so it doesn't move. And then on this side I'm going to make sure that that's 20 here as well, and that's right. I'm just going to swivel it a little bit, and if I've got a pin on that on one point, it's not going to move the fabric. Okay, so I'm going to start pinning that on now. Okay, back in a sec. Alright, so I've got two pattern pieces in place now. I've got my facing, and the facing's also got a grain line on, and I've made my grain line with my facing parallel to the fold line of my fabric. Okay, that's easier than measuring it all the way down here. Just take it to the closest straight edge. Okay, and if you notice, I've put it quite close to my pattern as well. The pattern's quite close, and that's so we've got all this extra fabric here if we want to make a belt, or you know, we want to make something else. You can make more out of like your big bits than you can out of little bits. Okay, so you don't need to use that many pins. Say about 10 for each pattern piece, whatever you feel comfortable with. Okay, and I'm going to just start cutting this now. I'm going to cut these bits, and then I'm going to drag my fabric up and cut the back. Okay, so let's get my scissors. Okay, so I'm right-handed. So what I always do is I sort of make sure that when I'm cutting, the pattern bit is this side. Okay. Now as you notice, we've got little notches in the pattern, and they're really important when we're sewing our pattern pieces together, because they're like balance marks, and we can pin them so they're together, and then we know that the fabric's going together evenly, and it's one bit's not going to be longer than the other. Okay, so when you're cutting these notches, just do a little tiny snip or anything, just something that's going to show, yeah, just going to be an indication to you, because we're only going to have just over a centimetre seam allowance. You don't want to cut it too far, make these notches too big. So here, there we go. That's about the size of my notch. Okay, it's just a couple of mils. Okay, so I'm going to carry on and get myself square into positions, the most comfortable positions to do this. Yeah, I'll get over here, cut down, and then I'm going to twist myself round, because it's easier going this way than it would be turning round, but whatever works for you. But just make sure, you know, don't be afraid to sort of experiment and see what's your most comfortable position. I'm just going to put a little snip for a notch there. It's just a little tiny snip of the fabric, and I know those snips, and when I get to them they should sort of line up together when I'm pinning them together. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and cut this out now, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so I've got my front and my facing, part of my facing cut out. And this bit is going to probably be the belt, but I'm not going to cut that out yet because I've got a little sort of shortcut for doing that, which I'll show you later. So basically all I'm going to do now is fold these up and put them somewhere ready for sewing, but leave the pattern inside. Okay, so you know what all your pieces are going to be. Okay, so I'm going to do this now, and then I'm going to just bring my fabric up. I'll be back with you in a minute when I've got my next bit in place. Okay, so I put my pattern pieces away safe somewhere. I'm just going to pull this up, leave this piece intact, okay, and just pull the rest of your fabric up. If you've got a nice table, folding the fabric over like this and cutting your pieces It just makes it easier if it's a little bit thinner as well, doesn't it? A bit narrow, it'll go on a table. Okay. So there we are, we're just going to spend a bit of time flattening this out, maybe giving it a little iron. Making sure these self edges are together. Okay, so I'm going to cut the back bit out now. So you'll know the back because it says back on it. And it also has got a straight edge rather than that curved bit. And now it's really important when you're doing this that you put this, it's got this sort of line on it and it says cut to fold. And what that means is you cut it, put that on the fold of the fabric. And that means when you open it out, you'll have like this complete back to your kimono. You won't have a seam down it, okay? So that's the top neck piece there. So I'm going to start pinning that in place. And while I'm at it, you've just about got room for the sleeve in here, okay? Now if your fabric isn't wide enough, you'll have to use the extra at the end to cut this sleeve out. But this is nice wide fabric, it's 140 wide, so I've actually got space for my back and for my sleeve all on. Okay, so I've cut the sleeve, let's put that away. I've cut all around here and the bottom, but I didn't cut this. This is a fold, okay, so don't cut along the fold line, otherwise you'll end up with two pieces for the back rather than one. Okay, so now all we've got to do now is cut the belt and the back facing out, which is the facing that goes around this bit at the back of the neck. Okay, so let's get them out of the way. Okay, so this is the piece of fabric that was left over from the front part of the kimono. So what I'm going to do, so that's the lot, that was folded this way, but all I'm going to do is open it out and I'm going to fold it this way now, and that means that I can cut the belt in one piece. There's just not as much cutting to do. Okay, so I'll put those folds together and I'll get my belt pattern and I'll cut my belt out of there. Okay. Okay, so there's two belt pieces. Okay, so basically we're having a super long belt because if you're making a long kimono it looks good if it's long, but then you can always cut it and make it shorter if it doesn't suit you. So anyway, this pattern is for a super long belt. Okay, it's going to be 4 times the length of that, and it'll be about that wide. Okay, so as with the back, we've got a cut on fold mark, and we're going to put that on the fold of the fabric, and this on the fold of that fabric. Just line them up together. Put these on your fabric wherever you've got excess. Okay, if your fabric's narrow, you might not be able to do this with the bit that you cut, the excess that you've got from where you cut the front pieces. So, but you will find enough. Okay, so the only other bit that you've got left now to do after you've done your belt is the facing for the back of the neck. Okay, so you can see that's got another little cut to fold symbol on it. So with this bit of fabric that's been left from the back of the kimono,
yeah,
I'm going to fold that over that way. So we've got a fold, flatten it out. I'm going to place that on there. I'm going to put it right close to the top, so we've got all this excess fabric left, so you've got lots of remnants if you wanted to put a pocket on, or you make it scrunchy, or you know how to do that, a drawstring bag. I'm going to pin that all in place and I'm going to cut that out, all my pieces out, and then I'm going to come back and show you how to start sewing them together in a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you finish cutting, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces, pattern pieces all pinned together. Okay, your kimono facings, 2 facings. You've got, you've got 2 belts, okay? I've classed them as one piece. You've got your sleeve, and you're just going to fill them up and put them somewhere else, okay, because we're just going to start by pinning our shoulder seams together on our front and back of the kimono. Okay, so now we can take the pins out. Let's take the pins out of the front first. This is where if you use like too many pins, it takes ages to unpin everything. Right, fold your pattern up and put that somewhere that you're not going to lose it. So this is the back I'm unpinning now. Okay. Now as you can see the back, if you open it out, it's one piece. So I'm going to start by putting the back on the table. So there you can see the shoulder seams. That's the neck, and this is where the sleeves are connected to. Okay, so when we're sewing things together, you always put right sides together. Okay, so what I mean by that is, let's get the front of the kimono. Okay, see, this is the bit that goes here. Okay. Gorgeous. So that bit there is going to go, that's your shoulder seams going together. Okay, and that's the first bit of pinning we have to do. Yeah, we've got notches that need to be together. Okay, so my notches, I've done a tiny little slash on that. There you go. They're together. Now if you want to put your pins in this way, you can actually sew over them and you won't break your needle. But if you put your pins in this way and you hit them with the needle of your sewing machine, you're going to break your sewing machine needles. So if you want to have plenty of pins in to help you keep your fabric together, put them in this direction. Okay, if you're just new to sewing, you might find it sort of quite difficult to keep in a straight line, so a good little tip is to get your pen. You know, I was telling you about fabric marker before. Just get a little ruler and measure about a centimetre away from the edge, okay? And put a little dotted line. Doesn't have to be a complete line, just something to just give you a guide, okay? And it'll help you while you're getting used to the machine. Obviously, if that's like a dark fabric, you could just use a tailor's chalk and do it with that. Okay, so I'm just going to pin this other piece into place and then I'm going to take it over to the machine and sew it. And I'll bring you over to the machine with me to do that. Those two notches together. Back in a sec. So just before you start, what I do is like check out the size of your, just make sure your stitch is nice, there's not, you know, it's not pulling, and you don't want too small of a stitch or too big of a stitch. So about number 3 on your machine. Okay, so that's nice. It's like not too big and it's not too small if you've got to unpick it. So that's okay now. So right, I'm going to show you 2 different ways of making sure your seams are sort of nice and straight when you're starting off. So let's start here on this inside edge. I'm going to do a back stitch. I'm sewing in black just so you can see, but you can obviously choose a cotton that matches. Okay, so I'm sewing along these lines, the blue lines, and just go right over your pins and it should be fine. And when you get to the end, just do a little back stitch. Okay, and now if you don't want to bother with those lines and you don't want to go over your stitches, another thing you can use is this, which is a stitch guide. It's just a magnet, and basically you get it at the right size, and you just run your fabric along the side of the magnet, and that might suit some people. Just make sure your notches are matched up. Okay. Okay, so that's our shoulder seams done. We've just got to decide on a way of neatening those now. Okay, so if you had an overlocker, you could just overlock that, and anyone who's been to my classes just uses the overlocker. You might not have one of those at home. If you've got a zigzag on your machine, you can just zigzag along these edges. Or if you haven't got a zigzag, or you wanted to do something different, you could use something called pink and shears, and I'll just demonstrate them to you now. So if you've been to my class, you'll know that we've used the overlocker to finish off this edge, and we just put the 2 seams through the overlocker. You might have your own overlocker at home. You could have a zigzag machine. If you've got a zigzag machine, you could just open that up and you could zigzag right along the edges, and that'd help prevent it from fraying. Or you could use these, which are pink and shears. Strange looking clunky things that have got like a serrated edge. And what you do is, if you just use them and try and line them up with your last zigzag as you sew along, and just go along the edge of your fabric as close as you can to the edge. You don't want to I've cut too much off there. You want to try and keep it as close to the edge as possible. And that will help prevent that fabric from fraying. Okay. It's just a basic way of doing it. It's not ideal, it's not fantastic, and if you have got a zigzagger, if you wanted to zigzag along that as well, it would be even better. It just depends how much time you want to spend. Okay, so that's pink and shears, and that's your edge of your shoulder seam. I'm going to take that back over to the table now and pin my sleeve on. Okay, so I've got my my kimono opened up with the wrong side showing, and I'm just pressing my seams. So it's like a really good idea to press your seams as you go. So I know without like under pressing or something, isn't it? Rather than waiting and just doing it at the last minute, doing everything together. So get them seams nice and flat, and you can see they're a nice serrated edge that you get when you use pink and shears. Okay, so now we've got our sleeve. There you go. Now we've, because we cut the edge of the sleeve on the selve edge, you could, if you wanted, just cut that off, okay? But I'm too lazy to bother. There you go. So we've got a number of notches on this kimono. We've got one in the middle, which is there, and we've got one at the back. Okay, so this is the middle one. And we're going to line that up with, oh, I'll tell you what, a good thing to do is to turn that over now. So we've got our right sides up. That's confusing. Okay, does that make sense now? So we've got the back of our kimono, there's the back of the neck, and here's the front bit, and there's where we're going to put our sleeve. Okay, so we've got to make sure this is the right part of the sleeve first. So always right sides together, and let's find our notches. That notch there is going to the centre seam, and we should have another notch if this is the right one. No, that's the wrong one, because that's going to the front, that notch. So this is the sleeve for the other side. Okay, so this should be it. There's our centre notch, put them together. There it is, yeah, that's the centre notch. So that is going to our shoulder seam. Open up that and pin it in, whichever way you like to do it. And then our other notches, those notches meet there. Okay, so we know we're right. Okay, and then that just goes to the end, and it should just about overhang it, which is absolutely fine. So don't worry about that. So put plenty of pins in, you know, so when you get to the end here, obviously it's not going to be straight. You've got to move that way, okay? Now don't think that clothes are straight. Clothes aren't straight, they don't lie flat. Your seams have got to lie flat, but the rest of your clothes can be in a bunch as long as your seams are flat. So don't try and get that all flat and expect this to be flat as well, because it won't be. Your shoulders curved, okay? So don't think you've done anything wrong. So that should just meet that little curve on the side seam of your kimono. Okay, there we go. Now if you want to, and you like that method of marking your sew lining, go ahead and do that. Alright, but I'm going to just turn this over now, and I'm going to put the other sleeve in. Okay. There we go. So right side's up again. Here's the shoulder seam, here's the back this time, and here's the little edges of your sleeve where your sleeve's going. Now we know this is right this time. We're going to put that seam, that little notch to the seam, make sure that's opened up. And we should have a notch here to match. Yep. And that just goes over that little bit. And let's just pull that out. There we go. Cool. Right, there's our sleeves pinned in place. So I'm going to take it over to the machine now, and I'm going to sew that down. Okay. Right, we're going to start at this side of the sleeve. Okay, so you've got your little curve, and this should actually overhang your curve. Okay, so we're going to start on that little point just there. Okay, right, forward and back a few times. Obviously I'm doing this in black. I don't know if I've mentioned this. I wouldn't normally sew it in black. Mind you, there is black in it, isn't there? So, and I'll just use my magnet. Oh, another thing to mention, if you're using your magnet, it's probably not a good idea to put your pins in that way, because they'll just get in the way. But just make sure your seams are together, okay? That's really important, because you're putting those seams together and you want them to be pretty even. There we go. So if you pin it, you know that you pinned it when the notches are together, so you know they're together, but you could just keep checking as you go along. Right. When you get to the end, there we got our little overhang again. So we're going to sew ideally just to where that overhang meets. So there we go, and if you turn it over, we've got a little flap like that. Okay, and I'm going to do the other one now. So at this stage you might want to just put the kimono around your shoulders, and you can see it's just taken shape, isn't it? There's the sleeves, there's a fold over. Okay, so it looks like that. You know you're on the right tracks, you know what it's sort of going to look like. Okay, I'm going to carry on now, and I'm going to do the facing pieces. I'm going to just hang this. Okay, so here's our neck piece of facing. When you open this up, because you cut it on the fold, you've just got one complete piece. And here's our two long bits that we cut. And put those pieces with the rest. And now, right, Right, let's put these facing each other. Right, so you need to put your kimono piece, your facing pieces down like that, so you've got a little curve on the inside and this curves in. That's really important, okay? So the curve goes round in the middle, okay? And then you can put one piece of facing to there, and it's always right sides together, and then put your pins in whichever way you like to put your pins in. And then you need to put this bit onto there. Okay, so it crosses over slightly here, that's fine. A little crossover. And then these bits. Match. There you go. So if you turn it round this way, this should be the shape you have. Okay, they should come in like that if you lie them flat. And if they lie nice and flat like that, you know you've got that pinned properly. I'm going to take this over to the machine now and just sew along the edges. I've got this opened out now, and I'm not actually going to do anything to these seams as far as finishing them off, because they're going to be actually inside the kimono. They're not going to be seen, they're going to be sewn and hidden, so they should be fine. So just make sure they're nice and open, so it's all going to lie flat. And then I'm just going to bring my kimono back to the table, or the floor, whatever you're working on. And what you need to do is open it like that. Okay, so the front bit is, opens out the way. So the front bit's all open. Now, if you'd like to, before your facing goes on, you can actually, or maybe it's probably best not to actually, just wait. I think it's less confusing if we just do this first. Alright, so what we're going to do is put the face in. So we're going to go right sides together again. We're going to line up the seam of the facing and the seam of the kimono, the shoulder seam. I'm just going to pin that all the way around, okay. Oops. Oh, crooked pins. So just make sure you start at the core, at the neckline, because once those two seams are together, then you sort of are plain sailing. And now you just match this up, and there should be notches as well to match. So if you match your notches up together, if you cut them, and put some pins in. Hold these seams together. And just take your time doing this, because if you just need to get it in right. Once you've got it lined up, this is actually the trickiest part. You know, once you've done this, it's almost done. Okay. So put plenty of pins in there to keep it together. Massive one. And then I'm just going to pull it up. And put it right the way to the hem. Okay. And it should meet. And your notches should match up together as well. There's our notches here. Pin in that, pin in the bottom. So I'm just going to go around and I'm going to pin this all the way around. You need a sort of flat space, so maybe it's a good idea if you've got like a nice bit of carpet that you could lay it out on. It might be a little bit easier than trying to have it all scrunched up on a table. There we go, let's get our notches together there. We know we're right if those notches meet up. And we're going to the end. Obviously, if you're making a short kimono, you're not going to have as much pinning and sewing to do as this, so it'll be a little bit less time consuming, but not as much fun. Okay, so I'm going to take that to the machine now. I'm going to start at this edge, okay? One thing I forgot to mention before is when you're sewing, always make sure that the fabric's this side of your machine foot, okay? You don't want to start sewing this way. Have your fabric all over this side. So let's see how that works. Okay, so I'm going to start at the bottom of the kimono. So this is your hem, or the bottom of it. And I've put plenty of pins in. Let's do a little back stitch to start. Obviously I'm not using pins, but you can have this pinned, you can have it marked if you want to, you can have if you like, you can be using a magnet just to sort of make sure it's going to be even the whole way, whatever your choice. But one thing to remember is when you are sewing on your sewing, you know, when you're bringing your fabric to your sewing machine, just make sure the main body of the fabric's this side of your needle, not this side. That's going to be really awkward to sew. Okay. There's our notches together. And sometimes you can give it a little pull as you sew as well, so you can just put a bit of tension behind and in front of it. So give it a little tug from this side and a tug from that side. There we go, I'm going around this corner now, so when you're going around a corner, the thing to sort of remember is just to go easy. Just sort of twist your fabric round as you go. Okay, so you're sort of straightening out your seams as you go through the needle. Are we at the corner yet? Oh, we're not. We're going through a bit of a curve. Okay. I put my pins in totally the wrong direction. So here's this shoulder seam and the facing seam, so they're together, right? But we're going to start curving now. So this is where you, okay. So basically just relax it into the needle. You can sort of straighten out your seam a little bit. Like this might be bumpy, but if you have your seam so it's pretty straight, that's good. And then we get round to the other seam. There they are, the line on top of each other, nice and flat. There's our notches on top of each other. There we go. So another notches. Oh, another notches. Now here we are, we're back at the bottom again. We've gone the whole way around. And just do a little back tack. Oh, sorry, back tack. There we go. So that's our facing all sewn on. Okay, and now we're going to take it back to the table and get that all pressed down. Oh, just before we go to the table, on this curved bit, I've got scissors anywhere. You could do with getting a pair of scissors. Oh, I'm doing these with my snippers, but if you've got scissors, it's better. And just putting some little notches the whole way around, just the whole way around the curve, okay, and that's going to help it fold back better. So I'm going to do that at the table now. Okay, so I've got the back to the table, and before I turn the facing round or do anything to the edge, I'm going to just do this curve here. See the curve on the neckline? So what we need to do here, because it's a curve, we need to give it a few little snips just so it's going to curve back nicely. So do this with a really pair of sharp scissors, and don't go too close to the edge of the stitching, because if you cut through the stitching, it's going to start fraying. So maybe a couple of mil away from the edge of the stitching. And just, even if you just want to do some snips like that, it's fine. Just on the curved bit, and that'll help it to fold back nice. It's especially important if you're using like a thicker sort of fabric as well. Okay? And now you'll find that that will press back really nicely. So I'm going to go ahead now before I do anything else, and I'm going to press this. No, I'm not actually, no. So the next thing I'm going to do after that is I'm going to deal with this raw edge. Okay, now I'm going to use my trusty pinking shears, but if you were in the studio, my studio, you'd obviously use an overlocker. If you've got an overlocker at home, you can overlock it. If you've got binding, bias binding would be lovely. It'd be nice to do some bias binding on it. To see how to do bias binding, you can check out one of my other videos, my bias binding video. But I'm just going to cut these now for speed with the pinking shears all the way around, and that's going to stop that. It's going to prevent it fraying as much. I'll be back in a sec. Okay, so I'm back. I've laid this down with the wrong side towards me, and sort of as flat as I can. And I've pinked all around the edge of the facing. Now you can see all the little zigzags, and I've actually pressed it back. Now usually if we were going to be really professional about this, if you wanted to be really professional, you could actually do like a little stitch along the edge of this seam to keep that down, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to press it, okay, so it lies back on itself nice and flat. Do bit by bit, okay, so I've pressed this bit. I'm going to put some pins all around the edge to hold it down, okay. There again, the seam should meet up again, and then I'm going to pull it down. And when you're doing this curved bit, just sort of ease it out, okay, just sort of put your fingers behind it so you get that nice curve, okay, and that facing should just follow that curve nicely, and then keep just pressing and putting pins in as you go. And pull it down. There you go. Sort of make sure that it's bent. You can see the face bit of the fabric is sort of curled over a bit, so you can't see the facing on this side of the fabric. If you do, it won't matter that much, but just sort of bend it over. There we go. you get to the bottom here, you need to fold that back, okay, here. Right, so here's the bottom bit. So we're going to do something a bit fancy at the bottom to make it dead professional looking. So we'll put a little pin just this side of the seam, see there, okay, and then we can fill that pin over and we'll measure up about 4 centimetres. Actually no, we'll do 5 centimetres. Okay. And we'll put a rose pins across there. We're going to sew across there. Okay. And before we start sewing the facing down, we do this. Right, and I'll show you what happens. I'll take that to the machine now and show you how that looks when it's turned out. Facing, so I'm going to just do this little row stitch in, and we're going to do it right to there. Okay, so let's take that pin out. Yikes. Right. So what happens is when you turn that facing back, let's just fold it over. There we go. So that's going to be your edge. Okay, so you get a nice professional looking corner at the bottom of your kimono. Okay, and when we come to hemming it, we just hem that like that. Okay, so we'll turn our hem over once, and then we can start sewing the facing of the kimono down. And I'm going to start at the other side. Okay. There we go. So our facing. Same with this. Okay. So I'm going to turn my hem back. So when we do the hem, it's all prepared. I'm going to start here. And make sure you've got plenty of pins in this. And you're just going to sew along the edge of that snipping, okay? And keep it nice and flat when you're doing it. We start going around the bend now, literally. But once you've finished this little bit of it, that's the most awkward bit done, and you basically haven't got much to finish off at all. There we go, our two seams together. Around this corner, so just use your hand to flatten it and keep sort of twisting it round. Okay. We're going. Okay, so I have pressed this all back, all this facing back now. Give it a little press, should be nice and flat at the edges, and the seam should meet there. So if you put enough pins in, and also it should lie nice and flat, and you shouldn't have any problem with that. So you'll have a row of stitching showing on the top side of your fabric. Obviously this shows a lot because it's black, but if you use, you know, you can use a contrasting colour if you want, it's fine. But some people just like to have something that's going to blend in so it's not so visible. Right, so we're ready just to do the last step now, well, the second to last step, which is put our side seams together. So for that, you're going to put your right sides together again, and you're going to fold your sleeve over. Okay. And you've got like a little corner here, haven't you? You're going to start pinning on that little corner all the way along to your sleeve. Don't worry if you don't quite meet. You can sort that out later. So mine aren't quite meeting there for some reason. So I'm starting at the hem again, okay? Let's put that under the machine. Now you might notice that I'm doing quite a narrow hem, but on your patterns I've actually allowed for a centimetre and a half. So if your hems look a little bit wider than this, it's fine. So I'm sort of pulling this through, easing it, pulling the back, pulling the front, putting a bit of tension on it, making sure all the time that these seams are together. So when I get to here, I'm going into a little bit of a curve. Can you see the curve shape there? So I'm just basically gonna go, because we're not just going to do a straight corner, we've got a little curve. Okay, and just make sure these seams are together. That's it. Oops. Oops. Get that out the way. There you go. Right to the end. So just finishing off the hems now. So here's my side seam, snipped it, and it's all pinked, and I'm just going to press my hem in before I do anything. So first of all, I'm just going to press up about a centimetre, okay, because it's going to be a double hem, and then 4 centimetres, because remember we did a 5 centimetre turn back on this facing. So I'm going to press it in, okay, just give it a press, and pins, that's it, okay, all the way. Okay, so that's going to be pressed and pinned, and now just here's your sleeves, so you can do the sleeves the same, press them in. Actually, we'll turn the sleeves inside out to do. Okay, so centimetre down and then 4 centimetres. And if you wanted to use a sleeve board, which is, could you pass me a sleeve board, please? This is a sleeve board. Called that because it's narrow enough to be able to get your sleeves in. Really handy, loads of time. You can pick these up at like second-hand shops. I see them all the time. Because people don't really iron that much, do they, anymore? But I think it's really handy if you're a sewer to have one of these. So don't forget to open up that seam. Sleeve board, just the seam of your sleeve, and then just go round like that. Pressure. Press your seam in. Is this making sense?
Yes.
All the way round. Oh, I think I've got a bit wonky there. If you don't have a sleeve board, it's absolutely fine. You can do it just on your ironing board. Just fold it back like that. So you don't need to do the pink and shears on that because the double seam is going to finish that edge for you and for the bottom as well. Okay, so I'm going to go and take them all over to the machine and sew them down to our belt. Okay, so we've got 2 of these bits. Okay, so as I said, this is cut to make an extra long belt in case anybody wants an extra long belt. But you can sew it together and then you can always cut a little bit off if you don't like it before you actually finish it. So there you go, that's one half of your belt. Put that down and then put the other half on top of it. And we're going to just sew them together. So we're going to have a seam in the belt, but it will be at the back so you won't really see it. Okay. Right, so let's take this over to the machine. So I've sewn the 2 edges of the belt together. Okay, so you've got a really long, super long belt. Here you go. Now you don't need to have it that long. It's probably a good idea at this stage to wrap it around yourself and decide how long you want it. And you can always cut it off, but you can't add anything, can you? So I'm going to have this really long belt anyway, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to put face sides together and I'm going to I'm going to do something called bagging out. Okay, so what it is basically I'm going to sew this together with the right sides together. Okay, so I'm going to pin it first and then I'm going to turn it inside out. So the thing is, if we're going to turn it inside out, you've got to leave a gap to do that. It's really long, this. Okay, but we're not going to do the gap at the ends. When we're going to do the ends, we're going to actually sew the seams into the ends. Okay. Oh dear. My videographer's gone to tend to the baby, so I'm doing this myself. You might hear him there in the background. Oh dear. Okay. It just adds to the reality. Okay, stay with me. So here we go. There's this edge. So there's our super long belt and it's inside out and it's got right sides together, and I'm going to start sewing that now. Well, you can put a lot more pins in than this, but I'm just going to do it quickly to show you what to do. The machine. Okay, so I'm going to start here at this edge. I'm going to show you how to turn a corner. Basically, get almost to the edge. Put your needle down, okay, but lift your foot and that'll keep the needle in place. Then you can turn and do a nice corner. So I am going to work as fast as I can so I can just show you what to do next. Obviously, if you're on a domestic machine, they're a little bit slower. But they'll do the job just as well as this. Now, do you remember I said that you're supposed to leave a little gap to turn it inside out? So just before you get to that seam, just do a little back stitch and then bring it over to about here. Just maybe on that seam, And then we'll start. We'll do this side. So if you just leave a gap, maybe 2 inches is enough. Maybe an inch should be not quite enough. It might be a bit tricky, but yeah. So this seam is going to be inside of the belt, so you don't need to worry about doing any pinking or any finishing off to it. There we go. And you can take your time and do this, you know, I'm rushing it a little bit. Right, so here we go to the edge again, so needle down, foot up, twist it round, and gonna just go to the end. And that's the belt sewn. So here's our little gap that we've left. So we're going to use that to turn this belt inside out. So basically, you can use your fingers if you use your fingers, or you can, yeah, I think your fingers will go in there. And just pull it inside out. Okay. So there you go, I've turned my belt the whole way inside out, so it should have a nice flat edge and all the seams are hidden. And I turned it out through this little gap. Where is it? Here. Okay, so if you want, you could go onto the machine and just sew that up, which I think I'll do now. Sew that little gap up. So, okay. So now there's your belt, all lined and pressed. Okay. So I'm going to sew my hem now at the bottom, and this is where a little magnet really comes in handy, because of course this is top stitching, so you're going to see this on the right side of the fabric. So let me see, let's position that about here, okay, and that should catch the seam in. So we're going to start right at the edge, okay, and we're just going to run that seam around so that bit of fabric just runs along the side of that magnet. And what that'll do, it'll make sure that your seam is really even and professional looking from the outside. Okay, it's called a stitch guide. So we just keep going right around. Give it a little pull as you're going around, because some fabric likes to sort of gather up. Okay. Okay. So what you see is you've got a really sort of even stitch the whole way around. Okay, because obviously this is a stitch that's visible on the right side of the fabric. So if you use that magnet, that's quite a good little tool. It just sort of ensures that you have like a really even seam. I'm sure you can see all the way. Okay. So next thing to do is to do the sleeves. So I'm going to turn the kimono the right way around to do the sleeve. Okay, I'm going to start on that inside seam, and then again I'm going to use this magnet. Okay, so this is the right way round, and it just gives us good access to that edge, that hem edge. There we go, just running it along the side of the magnet again. And when we get to the end, don't back tack, just go over it. Okay, go over the actual seam. Okay, so there again, you can see, hopefully, we've got a really nice straight edge, straight seam. Okay, so I'm going to do the other sleeve now, and then I'll meet you back at the table.
You're on.
Hi, alright, so this is the finished kimono, okay. I've got the belt tied at the front, and it's just on the model, and it's looking really nice. Basically this takes about 5 hours in my classes to make, so 2 sessions to cut out and complete. You could always do things like add pockets to it as well yourself. Obviously this is a long one, but some people make them like short or knee length, so that's just up to you, and it's obviously marked on the pockets on the pattern, the different lengths. So there you go. I hope most of all that you really enjoy doing this, and it's a nice relaxing project for you. So don't go too fast, and pin everything really well before you sew it, and use your iron a lot, and keep ironing in between every stage and make sure everything's nice and flat, and have fun.